Welcome back. Now we'll be talking about the dreaded D word, that's debt. We see domestic debt push Nigeria's total public debt stock from 41.60 trillion naira as of March 2022 to 42.84 trillion as of June of the same year, showing an increase of 1.24 trillion naira in 3 months, according to the Debt Management Office. And we also got that screaming headline from Bloomberg, quoting a comment from Finance Minister Zainab Ahmed, that Nigeria may be exploring debt restructuring, even though the government has refuted those claims. Well, joining us now is Gospel Obele, CEO Streetnomics. Join us via Zoom there. Great to have you on the program.
Morning.
Hello, Gospel. Great to have you on the program.
Yes, thank you for having me, Ladi. Good morning.
Good morning. So it's all about the debt restructuring going about now, trending. And apparently the finance minister did hint, in that interview, but the government have, taken that back. But is it really a bad thing for us to restructure?
Well, I mean, fundamentally, there is a key revenue crisis, of course, which has led to the debt crisis we find today. There are cash flow challenges right now, and there are a lot of uncertainties into the build-up of how interest rates may evolve in the new year and all of that. So, to the federal government, yes, it makes sense to restructure, but that's still looking for a short-term pathway to a short-term relief, on the challenge we have right now on the table. Until we focus on the core structural and root causal, conversations on the how to. I don't think we're going to get out of this anytime soon, but that's a possibility.
And what is it signaling, to the market?
Of course, it signals that there is a lot of fiscal crisis going on the large part of things, not just the inability to pay debt, but there is a lot of fiscal crisis ongoing. It also signals that there are cash flow problems within the fiscal space. And this is not quite good in terms of investors' confidence, in terms of rolling out understand the fact that the first part of next year or the first quarter of next year would be all elections driven. And that conversation alone will hamper heavily on how public finance are used as instrument, for the conversations or economic inclusion conversations that need to happen. So it's not really positive. And I don't think it's also a very good view for the incoming government as well to deal.
Right, but it's good that the government have actually refuted those claims, at this point. But what are the benefits, of exploring, a debt restructuring at this time?
Yeah, the top of mind is first off that you have opportunities to sort of like pace, your debt repayment and your debt commitment as well. And that, quote unquote, all things being equal, should give you space to do other things, within it. But I mean, it's also a bit dicey right now because interest rates are on the rise globally. So that would mean that the more you think of restructuring your debt, the terms of servicing as well may also be revisited, in that context. And that may mean that you're likely to pay higher volumes of values of monies in terms of trying to restructure, trying to repay or service the debt. Second is the fact that, yes, there is a window that's expected that they could probably make the most of that relaxed period to do more things fiscally and for the economy. We also realize that with elections also come the need for political correctness. That means whatever the government of the day will be spending on will be items that tick the box to help them retain power in the coming season. It's just how it works for climes like ours. So either way I want to look at it, I really don't see the proper how things will really take off in terms of impact and in terms of delivering of the right priorities over time. But the idea makes sense on the surface level.
Right, but I know that the cons, obviously will include, having a bad look, for the country. But what else?
Yeah.
What other cons are there?
It means that over time there will be a lot more that would have to go into debt servicing. It means that because of the interest rate conversation happening globally now, there also be a downside risk in terms of government revenue as well being used to fund debt services, meaning that the about 6 trillion that the government will use to fund debt service next year maybe more than that in context because of the interest rate impact. And so, but for me, the cons majorly are the fact that we are not even focusing on what the real conversation is to a very large extent. The more reason why you have this restructuring conversation is because there is a core fiscal and discipline challenge and revenue crisis that we are facing. And until all of that is properly being dealt with, I do not think any strategy in the mid to long term would really help the state of the economy, as it were.
And we saw that comment actually impacted Nigeria's Eurobond market prices there. But how do you see this impacting our credit rating?
I mean, the stakeholders who are involved in credit rating already know the history of this conversation. And technically, what we're trying to tell them is that we are almost insolvent or not being able to pay back our debts. We have cash flow challenges, and there may be other things to consider on the table as well. So I do not really think it will hold a very positive stance for credit rating, because it means that you're not being able to stand credit worthy as at when due, and you have to probably come back and renegotiate your terms and all of that. So there is just a question around that, and also a possibility that you have to borrow more next year. So meaning that you're stockpiling on your debt portfolio, and you're looking for ways to restructure how you pay back, and interest rate is also not on the positive end of this conversation. So I really do not think that the outlook is really positive for credit rating. However, if debt monies can be better channeled for better infrastructure or productive streams, then again, that conversation can be countered.
And there we see the government actually planning to securitize debt owed to the CBN via Ways and Means. How do you see that strategy?
Well, I mean, the central, the government is trying to maximize all of the opportunities they have right now, in trying to ensure that these debts are probably restructured, obligations are met, and all of that. So, I mean, the central bank does make sense in terms of finding a win-win around how to just get across today, for another day and all of that. So, it's top of mind. It makes sense to have that conversation, because if you're thinking of that internationally, you should be thinking of that locally as well. And that balancing will help to get the relief that they need to engage public finance in the next economic year.
And do you think that investors will be keen on that security?
Well, then again, there are also interest rate conversations. There are other elements that need to be considered, especially when it comes to conversations like this. The fact that we're going to an election year is also going to disrupt a lot. I mean, these are conversations happening right now because of the current cabinet and other things that we currently have. But once the elections are over, and it's obvious that things may change, there are also questions around what may change as well. So investors are likely trying to watch both the political and doing business landscape to be able to judge all of this debt security conversations and all of that to make decisions. So I do not think that this particular criteria or narrative would be the singular narrative that investors will consider. It's going to be very dicey. It's going to be very dicey in the next coming months, and those the events that will shape the next coming months will shape as well investors' decisions in what to invest on at the end of the day.
Yeah, so much to look out for there, Gospel. Yeah. But in a nutshell, how does this all impact you and I and the average Nigerian on the street?
I mean, it's very important that we've moved past the conversation of a debt crisis. In 2003, 2004, it was a debt crisis. But right now, what we're looking at is a fiscal crisis. And that's at the bane of this conversation. And the fiscal crisis is also what has amplified into the increased or worsening state of the cost of living right now in the country. No matter where you are as a country, if we do not move towards productive streams of engagement and also enabling markets, organizing markets to amplify your non-oil revenue players and all that, I do not think there will be any hope for the common man in terms of doing business, in terms of household finances and all of that. So most of these conversations still thrive heavily on getting our fiscal acts right and working closely with the monetary authorities to ensure that we are delivering economic progress for the average Nigerian. I think the average Nigerian is getting poorer every month, and it's a form of poverty trap, within the context of how the economy is being managed currently. So it's quite unfortunate. Businesses will also have a tough time trying to secure loans and scaling, doing business as it were, and jobs will also be on the line. Retrenchment is also a possibility. Political correctness is also in view based on the elections happening for Q1 next year. When all of these things are considered, I mean, I just think the average Nigerian needs to begin to rethink other streams of income, other streams of investment, cutting down on discretionary income maybe, and also trying to ensure that they have a plan B, to sort of like relieve themselves on the cost centers in terms of cost of living and cost of doing business, as it were. But then again, until the economic moves or tilts toward more progressive or productive-based investments and decisions and all of that, I do not think that this challenge would exit anytime soon, especially in impacting the average Nigerian.
And obviously now, the average investor, at this time, have a lot to think about. But
Yeah.
what do you think, how do you think investors here, local investors, can kind of like shield or have some kind of buffer, to protect themselves from the negative impact of all of this?
I think local investors need to rethink how they'll be investing going forward. And it would make sense to begin to look at both securities, both businesses and markets, that are evolving within the context of these challenges we find ourselves in. There are much more resilient securities, there are much more resilient markets. There are also markets where you have a stronger consumer purchasing power, regardless of where you are on the commission as an investor. So you want to think of how to take these opportunities and take them in clusters as well. The idea of taking in clusters simply means that you're positioning yourself to latch on that concentration of energy that the market can provide in terms of productive returns. And that's what I also think the federal government should be doing. With debt monies, you can't take out borrowing because you need to borrow to finance a bit of your budget. The concern is, what are you borrowing for and who is spending the monies that you're borrowing? Until these two elements come into the middle and plug in these monies in critical sectors that can drive productivity in their clusters as well, I do not think that there will be any form of significant uptake in returns, ROIs, and all that. Same also to the average Nigerian seeking to think of investment opportunities. You need to think of sectors, markets, and institutions that can help you take the lower risk, and you can also do them in clusters within the time being as well. So those are the initial thoughts I have in mind concerning outlook for investors going into the new year and for Q4.
Right. Well, investors have a lot to chew on there, and rebalance, portfolios, try to find where to make money, at these times. Thank you so much. That was Gospel Bele, Chief Economist, Streetnomics Limited. It was great having your perspective on the show.
Thank you for having me, Ladi.